All of our productions at GCTV are sponsored in part by Bay State Health, providing the care you and your family need when you need it, close to home. Visit them online at baystatehealth.org. Greenfield Savings Bank. Visit them at 400 Main Street in Greenfield. Call them at 774-3191 or go online to greenfieldsavings.com. Greenfield Community College, providing access and excellence in higher education in the Pioneer Valley. Visit them at gcc.mass.edu. The Hammond Family. The Hammond family are longtime supporters of Greenfield Community Television. New Fortune Chinese Restaurant on the Mohawk Trail in Greenfield. Visit them online at newfortunema.com. Call them at 772-0838 and check them out on Facebook. Real Cleaning Services, cleaning Hampshire and Franklin County since 1972. We don't cut corners, we clean them. Check them out online at realclean.com. Call them at 413-422-1143. People's United Bank, located at 45 Federal Street in Greenfield. You can call them at 774-3713 or visit them online at peoples.com. The Solar Store of Greenfield, replacing fossil fuels and nuclear power one home at a time. Visit them at 23 Fisk Ave. Call them at 413-772-3122 or visit them online at solarstoreofgreenfield.com. Thank you to our sponsors for supporting all of GCTV's productions.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is a meeting of the Greenfield School Committee. It is the vision of the Greenfield Public Schools to provide every student access to an academically rigorous, enriching, and well-rounded education that affords them opportunities to be well-connected scholars and contributing members of the broader society in which they live. We're gathered here today for our regular meeting, January 10th, here at Greenfield High School at 21 Bar Avenue. This meeting is being recorded by GCTV, and if anyone else in the house is recording now, please let us know for the record. Seeing no one, we'll move on to the Secretary's roll call, please.
Committee Member Holland. Committee Member Ekstrom.
Here.
Committee Member Karen.
Here.
Vice Chair Ward. Here. Chairman Nunez.
Here.
We have quorum.
And seeing Mayor Martin absent, thank you. At this time, I'll accept a motion to approve draft minutes from December 13th, 2017. Is there a second? Second. The draft minutes, Member Karen, from December 13th. Since you were not a member at the time, I think it's best to abstain on that one. We will have the minutes from January 2nd in a second motion. Is there a second from a member that was present in December?
A second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Member Hollins?
Thank you. On the first page, under public comment, it talks about how much money it costs us to carry out tests. But we do a lot of tests. This was specific to the state testing program.
And so you are suggesting to change the record to carry out state tests?
I'm pretty sure that's what the discussion was, the state testing program.
Any discussion on that? All right. Member Ward?
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's not necessarily that we seek it. It's not necessarily that we seek the money. It's what kind of money is spent on the state testing.
I agree.
So maybe some rewording there is needed.
And suggested rewording would be to how much money does the district
spend from state and local resources, I think.
Okay. Superintendent?
Member Alexander.
Member Alexander?
Real quick, I'm trying to look it up here in the book, but it would make sense to me that we would need to discuss it with Mr. Selwyn to change what he actually said. That's the concern that I would want to make sure that we're not violating his words.
Mr. Chairman, our meetings are recorded, so we can just check the...
We can check the record. Yes, Superintendent?
I do think it's possible that it's intended to read receive instead of seek. How much money does the district receive from the state to carry out tests compared to what the Greenfield Public Schools spends? It's possible.
I think that was the discussion. It's a whole movement about state testing and what it costs.
My suggestion is that we review the record and table this until next meeting to be sure that we have the correct sentiment. Are there any other edits to the December 13th minutes? Okay. For now, we will hold December 13th until our next meeting. Is there a motion to accept minutes from January 2nd, 2018? And a second? Thank you. Any discussion on the minutes from January 2nd, 2018? Okay. All those in favor of...
I'm sorry, wait, I'm listed as absent, but I did show up later. As noted at the end, I don't know if that matters.
I believe that because you did not arrive until after the close and the adjournment of the meeting,
Yeah.
that this is an accurate record of the meeting.
That's fine.
Any other discussion on the January 2nd, 2018 meeting? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Myself, and one abstention? And were there any noes? No. All right. And moving on to public comment, are there any members from the public that would like to comment today? Hi, Doug, welcome. You have 2 minutes available.
I'll take them all. First of all, thank you for being careful with getting the words right. I've come back, and I apologize for talking about testing again, because I would really rather not be talking about testing at all, but it gets in the way of so many other things that I think it's an important issue. So when I was here last time, I asked about, though I don't know that anybody could hear it because the sound system wasn't working, about opt-out or test refusal. So my questions tonight are related to that, because in New York, where I came from, there were 250,000 opt-outs or refusals across the state in response to testing, because families felt very strongly that it was the only way they could register their concerns, that it was doing harm for the students, that it was wasting incredible amounts of money, and it was not improving education. And the fact that there is no evidence anywhere that shows that testing or high-stakes testing improves education. People said, how can we make this clear? This was a way to give voice to that. So when I came here last time, I asked, is there an opt-out policy or a test refusal policy for families who want to have their children not tested? So going back one step before that, I would ask the group, do you believe, is it a family's right to make a decision about whether their children are tested? And we're talking specifically here about the state tests, and I'm not talking about high school graduation related stuff. But in relation to state testing, is it a family's right to make a decision about whether to have their child tested or not, or whether to refuse that? Again, in New York, 250,000 said, we don't want to do this. Secondly, if you believe there is a right for families to do that, what is the policy both in terms of making clear to families they have that right? And then what happens if a child if his or her family refuses to have them tested, then what happens? What's the policy? It was very controversial in New York for a while. They were doing something called sit and stare, which is basically a punishment. While everybody's testing, the kid who's not testing it has to sit there and do nothing. There was a lot of pressure on schools to change that, and so they eventually set up rooms, and then I have to say overflow rooms, to deal with those who were not testing and let them read or whatever. So what's the policy? That's what I'm asking.
Okay. Thank you, Doug. The school committee, to my knowledge, has not had a full committee discussion on this matter. And so it would be just not genuine for us to voice an opinion at this time. I think that we each have our own individual opinions on it. Member Hollins?
If we pursue the topic, I think part of it is what is the state requirement for a diploma in Massachusetts related to state testing.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Are there any other members of the public? Hi there.
I just want to say,
No, it says push.
oh, I think I got it now. Thank you so much. I just want to reiterate my interest in future subcommittee and school committee meetings regarding curriculum, civics, and inclusive excellence. Certainly I'm not proposing anything for discussion or consideration tonight. Just want to reiterate that. I also just want to congratulate and offer my support to the newly constituted committee. Very proudly a member of the the Visioning Bear Intertribal Council here in Franklin County. And BEAR stands for Beauty, Equality, and Respect. And we work I'm a trained circle keeper, and in the circle, the belief is that all people are equal, although we acknowledge that people are different. And it's a powerful idea that is essential to democracy. And so I just want to invoke that. I follow the way of the medicine wheel, and the wheel, I pray to the four directions each morning. I certainly will offer my prayer to this group, to Spirit, for your good work and the good work you have done and will continue to do. But I'll say more about the idea of the circle and circle keepers and what we do in future meetings. But I'm very happy to see this newly constituted committee and know that I hope and believe that Spirit will be with you.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public that would like to speak? Seeing none, we'll move on to reports. Our first report is student representative. Do you want a second?
What? No, I thought I saw
Okay.
other student representatives. Don't worry about it.
Okay.
Good evening.
Hi. Welcome.
This is okay. To begin my report, I will just talk a little bit about, there's a lot of music things and student council things happening in the near future. There's a concert tomorrow evening here at the high school at 7 p.m. and the chorus at the high school here, both choruses, the select choir and concert chorus, and both bands will be performing. And everyone is invited to attend. It should be very good. As well to do with music, before the break, we had the mostly the chorus, but also a few band members go caroling for different elementary schools and primary education, young children at schools, and they all seem to really enjoy it. It went very well this year. There's a lot of response from them, and the chorus and band members did that for the last 2 days before vacation, and like I said, it was very well received. Also on the last 2 days of vacation, we had a pep rally from school for a while. It was a good idea. that was on the very last day of school, and everyone who attended school seemed very excited about it and got pumped up and pepped from the Pep Rally. Also, to continue, the Miss Whitney's class here at our high school, they're doing a fundraiser. They're raffling off the administrator parking spots here for the high school. It's to raise money for members of the hurricane again. Not members, the victims of the hurricane. And that's been happening during lunch. So it seems like it's been a good fundraiser. A lot of people are buying tickets and such. And speaking of fundraisers, also the French and Spanish trip that was talked about here either last month or 2 months ago that was proposed here. Fundraisers are still going on for that. They just got finished more or less with their Hillside Pizza fundraiser, and they're going to be beginning new ones soon. I'm not part of that program, so I'm not sure quite what, but I'm sure that my fellow student representative and I will keep you updated by next month about what fundraisers are going on and such. There's a dress drive going on tomorrow. It's held by the student council to give out free dresses to all members of the school if they want one, because we have a formal dance going on next month, February 11th, I think. And the student council is just offering dresses to anyone, and suits, to anyone who needs one, who wants one, who goes and sees something that really clicks with them, and they're offering to let those people take them for free. Also, going back to before break, the high school had a service day. We talked, I think 2 months ago, about service projects being incorporated into the curriculum here at our school for our teams that we have, and all of the service projects that were planned and talked about finally came to fruition. And so all the teams either took their cookies that they baked and went to the police department to hand them out, or went to the dog shelter to help out, care for the dogs just for a few hours, or picked up trash off of the street, stuff like that. And that all happened the week before break was over. There was something else. Oh, and this end of the semester is coming very soon, 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, I think it ends on Friday in 2 weeks. 2 weeks from 2 days from now. And along with that, midterms are coming up. So I guess offer as much support as you can to the students, because they tend to stress out about this. I don't know. But keep in mind that there's going to be a lot of studying going on and stuff, so everything's going to be really jam-packed for all of us. So, I don't know, be considerate, I guess, not that you aren't already. But that's all I have. So.
Thank you. Are there any questions for, yes, Member Ward?
Just a comment, you're terrific.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you for your report, and I enjoy it every month. I attended the bingo for the French and Spanish foreign language departments. That just finished. That was fun. Yeah. And the Hillside Pizza is now coming up. So if you want a pizza, you want to support our French and Spanish clubs, get in touch with me. I'll point you in the right direction.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Member Karen?
Is the dress drive tomorrow for people to pick out a dress or to drop off the dresses tomorrow?
Tomorrow it's going to be for people picking up the dresses. If you if you're asking this because you have dresses that you want to donate, you could do it. It's kind of hard to get it here from. But there's going to be another one. Okay. Wow, there's going to be another one in March as well, because prom, we do one for prom, and that one's open to members of other schools and all that. So that might be one that you want to donate to instead, because a lot of really short notice for tomorrow, but yeah.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nice job.
And so we'll move straight on to the Chairperson Report. I have just a few things to say to everyone. First, I just want to wish everyone a Happy New Year. I know we're into our second week now of this new year, but Happy New Year. And also, I want to thank our staff and administrators and the town DPW for the work that they've done with snow removal, ice removal, and the proactive measures that have been taken here at the schools in order to prevent any frozen pipes, etc. So thank you to everyone. As well, for committee members, I just want to say that I'm honored to serve as chair, and I really appreciate the support. In the past week, I've been connecting with the subcommittee chair people and the former subcommittee chair people. I've touched base with member Alexander, our secretary, and former chair Mayor Martin in order to ensure that the committee work continues smoothly. In your packet, I included a stapled roll of the chair. This is something that comes from the Massachusetts Association of School Committees. And I've been using this as a guide to ensure that I do the best job that I can here to serve the committee. And I do believe that the role of the chairperson is to serve the committee. So I brought this to you just so that you could see what I'm looking at. And also in the back, in the appendix, there are some helpful things that I think that are good for us, all committee members, to review. So that's just there for you to take a look. I did also want to remind members and just point out to new members that those subcommittees are a place to explore and deliberate on topics. They're an excellent place to be able to have extended conversations about things that are to be able to explore in a lot easier, slightly less formal setting than here at the full committee table. The subcommittees may choose to take a vote on recommendations, or they may choose to come to consensus. That's entirely up to the subcommittee. There's no rule or regulation on that. Both methods have been past practice here in Greenfield, and both are totally acceptable approaches to come to conclusion. As well, I want to remind everyone that subcommittees must have a quorum to meet to be an official meeting. That means that 2 members of that subcommittee must be present. And if we don't have 2 members of the subcommittee present at those meetings, then we cannot have an official meeting. I encourage new members to reach out to experienced members if you have questions about procedure. Please do be mindful of open meeting law. We are not to deliberate, especially online. This is something that can be a little bit different and jarring for new members when we're used to so much email communication in today's technological world. We should refrain from deliberation online. As well, I encourage everyone to take a look at Section B, which is our board and governance operations of our policy manual. All of us would benefit from just refreshing our minds on our governance and operations. And this will set us up for success moving forward. And last night there was a Municipal Finance 101 that was put on for city councilors. There were 3 of the school committee members that attended that workshop, and I would like to extend some thanks to Elizabeth Bracchia and also to the mayor's office for leading the workshop and extending the invitation to us as school committee members. It was quite informative. As well, I'd like to check in just briefly with everyone because various members have expressed interest in other learning opportunities specific for the school committee. I've heard interest in a budget development workshop, potentially a Google Apps workshop, and tips for taking minutes. So in a somewhat informal way, I'd actually just like to take a little bit of a poll here to see how many members are interested in a budget workshop and whether we need to, if there's just a show of hands to see if there's an interest in that. Okay. This is something that we can schedule as a committee workshop, and we can have, there are a couple different ways we can do it. We can invite someone in from the MASC to come in, or we can have a member of TMS who is our current financial managers that can come in. They've offered to give a brief workshop to us on budget development. Also, who's interested in more information on how to use the Google Apps suite? Is there anyone? One? Okay. I'm asking really informally just to see where things are, because if we just need to pair some people up, or if we need to actually have a formal meeting, it kind of depends on what the interest is. And tips for taking minutes. Secretary Alexander noted that there's a possibility to meet briefly with Susan Farber, who is our formal secretary for the full committee, and see if there's any interest in members having insight from Susan on how to take minutes while also be able to pay attention and run a meeting. Are there? Okay. All right. Well, I think that we have enough, certainly for the budget workshop, to have a full committee workshop. And what we would essentially need to do is take a poll via email. We can see when people are available, and that would be an official meeting. It looks like there's a little bit less interest in the Google apps. I can see about connecting people to that information. There may be some online or potentially through Carol Holtzberg, our technology administrator. And then I will check in with Secretary Alexander related to the minutes. In order to move forward with the budget workshop, and just to be a little formal about it, I think we should have a motion to have a committee workshop for budget development. Would anyone like to put forward a motion? Member Hollins?
I'll move that a school committee workshop be developed for around budget.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Member Hollins?
Could I comment that
Yes.
there are many ways to do budget, but when we're all said and done in Greenfield, we have to understand how the mayor thinks through budget, because in the end, the mayor decides what's recommended. And I think if we could include in the workshop, it's just my opinion, like how does the vocational school expenses and how do charter school expenses and how does the money revenue that the city receives or the tax rate, how does that all weigh in on how the mayor thinks about their budget? That would be interesting.
Thank you. Any other comments? Any other deliberation on this? Okay. All those in favor of a budget workshop?
Aye.
Okay. Any noes? Seeing none. Any abstentions? None. So all in favor. Member Hollins, did you have a comment?
Can we make other suggestions for workshops?
Sure.
I'd be interested in a workshop from a specialist attorney on the roles and duties of the school committee. I think we've had some training from a generalist, but the MASC uses some attorneys. They're very sharp on any technical detail you want to ask. What's the law? What's the best practice? Why you want to do one thing and not another? And I'd be very interested in that.
Thank you. So moving on with my report, I just have a couple more things. We do have a couple of appointments to be made this evening, and I was reminded by Member Hollins that we have the Planning and Construction Committee appointment. This is a representative from the school committee that serves on the Planning and Construction Committee that advises the mayor and the Capital Committee related to planning construction in Greenfield as a whole. And Member Hollins has been serving on this committee for, I believe, the past 4 to 5 months. It's a fairly recent appointment. My understanding is that it's a fairly new committee. And unless there is any opposition to it, I believe that Member Hollins is interested in continuing, and I'd like to appoint Member Hollins to continue in that position. Yes.
Is there a regular reporting structure for work that happens on the Planning and Construction Committee or communication to the Superintendent's Office of action on that committee?
That's a great question, and something that I've noted is that on our regular agendas, we actually haven't listed as an agenda item to have our representatives report out, so that's something that I'd like to add to our regular agenda items. And it would come in probably just after subcommittee reports to have our representatives report out. We have an appointment for parliamentarian. Member Alexander has been doing much research into Robert's rules and is very interested. He has also been serving as school committee secretary, is very familiar with our policies, and my recommendation is that Member Alexander serve as our parliamentarian. If there is no opposition or other interest in parliamentarian, okay. And my first question as parliamentarian is, do we need to vote on each one of these individual appointments? We should. All right. So let's go back to our Planning and Construction Committee. I would entertain a motion to appoint Member Hollins to Planning and Construction Committee.
So moved.
And a second? Any discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
And any noes or any abstentions? Okay. And at this time, I'll entertain a motion to appoint Member Alexander to be parliamentarian.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any noes? And any abstentions? Member Alexander abstains. Thank you. And we also have the position of representative to the Collaborative for Educational Services. There was a 1.5 to 2 page document in your packet explaining a little bit about the Collaborative for Educational Services. It's my understanding that Member Ekstrom is interested in this position. Unless, all right.
Second.
Any discussion? All right. I will just say, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Any noes? Abstentions? No abstentions? All right. Motion passes. Member Ekstrom, I know that the first meeting is, or the first meeting for you will be on January 31st, I believe, and it is right here in Greenfield at the Transit Center. But you can see all of the information on the Collaborative website as to when they meet and what to expect. Member Ward formerly served as our representative, so he can also fill you in on what the experience is like and what to expect. So thank you, everyone. I've decided to hold the legislative representative until our next meeting. I did include the policy in your packet here today. There has been some interest expressed from the school committee, but for various reasons I've decided to hold that in, and we'll have that as a formal agenda item at our next meeting. And well, that concludes the Chairperson Report. Thank you, everyone. And we'll move on to the Superintendent Report.
Good evening, everyone, and Happy New Year. I'd like to specifically welcome our new members, and it's a pleasure to have new members of the community serving. It's particularly a pleasure to have parents that are serving on this committee with a dual role of knowing firsthand what your children's experience is in the Greenfield Public Schools, and being a member of the community that's volunteering your time in addition to the other members of our committee that are serving in an ongoing way. So I welcome you, and I look forward to the good work we can do together. And to those of you in new positions, new chairs, new roles, thank you for your learning and flexibility and your service to our community and our children. In your packet, you have a number of informational items tonight, and I'll walk you through the packet. Starting with the report that begins the packet is the New England Association of Schools and Colleges. This is an update report that was provided to Greenfield High School. It was received in December and didn't make it into our last packet. I wanted to bring your attention to it. This is a progress report, and it highlights several of the many positive actions that the Greenfield High School has taken, and it identifies steps that are to be addressed in forthcoming progress reports. I've spoken with the principal about it. The faculty and the staff are really proud of the steps that they've taken that have been commended here. In particular, they'd like to call your attention to the fact that on the first page, it talks about the use of school-wide rubrics in all classes and the reporting of school-wide achievements using 21st century learning expectations. And essentially, they've gone above and beyond, and they're using standards that will be mandatory in the year 2020, and they're already beginning work now to make the standards that are applicable for tomorrow's learners right here in Greenfield High School today. So this report sheds light on the ongoing work and the work still to be done, and there will be opportunities if anyone has questions. The principal would be happy to speak to it, but this is informational, so you can see the kind of work we're tackling. Next in your packet are a sampling of the communications sent home from our schools, including our elementary schools. You see a lot of snow day reminders, parking reminders. We do spend a lot of time making sure our families know, please send your children with warm clothes in this bitter cold Arctic weather we've been having. And thank you to everyone for your understanding as we deal with the winter in New England. After the newsletters are our budget summaries. And you can see here that we have $902,523 available in our general funds at this point in time for the current fiscal year. If you compare that to December, January last year, we had around $600,000 available at this point in time. So we're doing well on our budget, achieving some efficiencies and making good use of those dollars. You have a general fund report, a modified grants report, the gifts and scholarship report, and those are all provided, excuse me, in your packet this evening. The business manager is here if you have any questions about that after my report. I would also like to highlight a couple upcoming events. The first is tomorrow evening, right here in Greenfield High School. You heard our student representative talk about the concert. Before the concert at 7 p.m., there's actually an informational night here at the high school. It's the second year in a row that we've had this event. It's a great chance for families to come out and hear what's happening academically and with clubs in the high school, and then stay for the concert afterward. It's a good twofer. So come at, I believe it's 6, the information night, 7 o'clock for the concert. January 15th, we are closed in celebration or remembrance of Dr. Martin Luther King Day. And January 16th, we have the Professional Development Day, an in-service day for all of our teachers. And then, oddly, we do go into February break not long after that. So February 19th through 23rd, we will be commemorating, enjoying February vacation, February 19th through 23rd. We talked at some point about having a school calendar on the January agenda. That's in progress, but it does need to go through the process outlined in the teacher's contract for the union to weigh in. So we expect that that should come forward at the February meeting. Thank you.
Are there any questions or comments for the superintendent? Member Hollins?
I just really appreciate the New England Association of Schools and Colleges report about the high school. And as we go into budget, I think we have to always sustain the same amount or more spending at the high school, because you get a warning and your accreditation is affected. So I just wanted to put in a plug for our budget, because our high school is like the flagship, and it's not good when it gets warnings on its accreditation. So we need to keep our budget strong.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions for the superintendent? Okay, moving on to our first main agenda item. We have for business today policy GCG, entitled Part-Time and Substitute Professional Staff Development. professional staff employment. This was tabled at our December meeting, and so it is here. We tabled it specifically until our January meeting. And Member Hollins was the former chair of the policy subcommittee. So Member Hollins, do you want to guide us through the work that's been done on this?
Sure. There's 2 copies of this policy. It looks like the copy that doesn't have any colors or strikeouts is the current policy, where it says part-time and substitute professional staff employment. We went over this multiple times. What we saw in the policy is that the whole section on part-time teachers was misplaced. This is about substitute teachers, and part-time teacher salaries are in the teacher contract. If you have a half-time teacher, how you handle that is in the teacher contract. So our recommendation was strike that whole part about part-time teachers. And the rest continued with a few clarifications, the difference between substitute teachers, because we have substitute paraprofessionals instead of the term substitute teaching. And the other change is that, I'll just explain. For me to keep track, I used a different color at each meeting so I could see where we made changes. But we added in July a sentence that the rates that the school committee sets would be, that the school committee sets the rate of pay for substitutes, which we do. And then there was confusion about the different types of subs, so we clarified that, which is in the subsequent meetings in August. First, the daily substitute is someone comes in for a day, and some schools have extended day. So there's 3 different rates for daily substitutes: full day, extended day, and half day. The extended day wording before was confusing. And the second type of substitute is a long-term substitute teacher. Somebody resigns in November and the superintendent brings someone in, and they may not be really on salary schedule, they're a long-term sub. And this is the guideline for how long-term subs are paid. The salary of long-term substitute teachers will be a percent of full-time salary, equivalent to the percent of employment, and the salary is based on the first step of the teacher salary schedule degree track, where the substitute teacher would be classified if employed full-time. So master's degree teacher, they'd be on master's step 1 for 50% or 60%. I'm pretty sure that's the practice, but since this was our one policy on substitutes and how we pay them, this clears up all the confusions and gets part-time teachers out of there.
Thank you, Member Hollins. And I just want to be clear to the full committee what is in front of you. So this policy is up for a second reading. This has been read by the full committee one time before. The process for policy adoption is to have 2 readings. And so at this time, we anticipate a vote on this particular policy. There's an opportunity to edit this document live right now in this meeting. So if there are suggestions or questions, that can happen right now. The majority of that deliberation generally occurs at the policy subcommittee level. However, up until we make a vote, any kind of decisive action, there is the ability for us to suggest edits. So formally, we will read through the policy specific language so that everyone's clear on what the language is that is being presented as a second reading. So I'd like to do that. Thank you, Member Hollins, for the background and walking us through. Would you mind, Member Hollins, to read through the policy, the exact reading, including the suggested title change? And
Yes.
my understanding is that the note is
not part of the policy.
including.
That was, my style was to explain the changes, to show how the current policy was changing. And then after the vote, we'd have a clean copy, all in one color. But this is, the actual policy will be substitute teacher employment. Each building principal will have the authority to employ as many substitute teachers as may be necessary to take the place of teachers who are temporarily absent. Periodically, he or she will submit to the superintendent a list of qualified substitutes for approval. Could I just say that regular black print is the current policy? The school system will employ as substitute teachers, to the extent possible, persons who meet the requirements for teacher appointments, and will assign substitute teachers on the basis of their areas of competence. When the supply of potential substitutes in a particular subject area is too limited to meet school department needs, there will be active recruitment for substitutes in those areas. All substitute teachers will be expected to provide educational services rather than to assume merely a student supervisory role. They will be provided with as much support as possible by building administrators and teachers. The school committee will set the daily rate of pay for substitute teachers. Daily substitute teachers. The school committee has rates for full day, extended day at ELT schools, and half-day substitute teachers included in the policy manual as Exhibit GCG-E. -E means it's an exhibit document, it's not really a policy. So we decided the rate should be attached as an exhibit. Long-term substitute teachers. The salary of long-term substitute teachers will be a % of full-time salary equivalent to the % of employment. The salary will be based on the first step of the teacher salary schedule degree tract, where the substitute teacher would be classified if employed full-time. The latter will be granted such additional benefits as approved by the school committee.
Thank you, Member Hollins. And so to open the floor to deliberation, we'll need a motion and second. Is there a motion?
A motion, we approve the revision of policy GCG, substitute teacher employment.
I'd like to make a motion to discuss.
Yes, you have to get a second.
I have to second you?
There has to be a
So
motion
make a
on the floor.
motion, then there's a second, and then
Sorry.
there's discussion.
No problem. It takes some practice.
So you could second Member Holland's motion.
If you'd like to
And then you
deliberate.
could discuss and vote.
I second.
Okay. And would you like to,
So my question is, we're being really specific with full day, extended day, and half day, and we're being more vague with long-term substitute. What are we calling long-term? Is 2 weeks long-term? Is a month long-term? I mean, for a teacher, or for even as a parent, 2 weeks to have a substitute teacher is a long-term. Longer, at very least.
I would say the superintendent decides that, but generally it's a long time. You win someone off the day rate and they get a more professional rate.
I can clarify that for you. Member Hollins is correct. The difference from, if I was a substitute teacher, the difference from my perspective would be day-to-day pay versus an appointment to a position. So I would be told that you are in this position, could be for a short term, for example, a teacher is on a maternity or paternity leave, or it could be you're in this position until such time as, until the school year ends, whatever. So I think from an employee perspective, it's clear, although you're right that it doesn't spell out at what time do you become a long-term, and practically speaking, that's when appointed as a long-term sub. So there's a hiring process, the person would receive notice and so forth.
I was just curious, because it would seem to me that would affect the money that is used or allocated in the budget, depending on when those assignations are made.
There's a benefit to the district of securing someone as a long-term substitute
Right.
versus day-to-day, because it assures that someone who is consistent is in front of the classroom working with students. There are additional responsibilities as well.
Sure.
I have a few comments.
yes, Superintendent?
So I think there's a lot of positive things that are addressed in this policy. It comes in more closely into alignment with our current practice. I think some of the languages has been cleaned up and clarified. I do like the inclusion of the exhibit GCGE, but because we've spelled out that rates will be attached in the exhibit, I wonder why we then go into the long-term substitute pay structure here. So if the committee wished to change pay salary rates at any time, you could do so by updating the exhibit. You could increase, you could decrease, you could address substitute pay rate. So it would seem to keep all of the pay rates on the exhibit as opposed to addressing long-term substitute pay structure here and leaving the others to the exhibit. So my recommendation would be to strike the last paragraph and just state The school committee has rates for full day, extended day at ELT schools, half day, and long-term substitute teachers included in the policy manual as Exhibit GCG-E. Underneath the orange, there is one vestige from the previous policy, which I believe you intended to leave off, which is the latter will be granted such additional benefits as approved by the school committee. If you could
No,
just-
it was intended to
that
be
was-
in.
So if that's intended to be left, it wasn't in the reading, I didn't know.
I did read it.
Oh, okay, I missed it, if it was read. I'm not clear what it's referring to, if it's referring to long-term subs. So perhaps that could be clarified. It's
Member
just in its
Hollins, do you
own-
have any insight into that last line, the latter will be granted such additional benefits as approved by the school committee?
Well, I think the school committee can decide who gets insurance benefits, for example, and a day-to-day sub likely wouldn't, but the school committee would decide probably someone who's working here for 6 months as a long-term teacher sub might, I don't know, what other benefits it might want to give. That was there before, it's probably been there for 30 years. I don't know. I do think it is unwise to remove the whole section on long-term substitute teachers, because that was in the prior policy trying to address part-time teachers. I think it was always, how do you handle the pay for long-term subs, and that is not in the teacher contract to my knowledge. So I think saying, here's how we pay, you're on the first step of the salary schedule, it's still a sub, it's just a different type of substitute. And the title is substitute teacher employment, so I think it fits.
To reiterate, we do need rates for full day, extended day, half day, substitute, long-term. They all need rates, and the school committee has the authority to set them. So I agree. But I'm just curious why some are spelled out here in terms of how we arrive at that dollar figure and some aren't. And if the word, the latter will be granted such, could be turned to long-term substitutes will be granted such additional, as long as it's clarified, that would be fine.
My recollection is actually that this is discussed in the Unit A contract. I could be mistaken about that. Is there any other deliberation on this? Mayor Martin?
Is this on? I think there's been a recent legal decision on substitute teachers that they are to be provided benefits. I'm not certain as to the final outcome of that court case. So maybe the superintendent can bring us up to date on that.
Sorry, I was distracting her.
I got caught in class on the legal ruling on part-time substitute employees.
Right.
The ruling, as far as I know, maybe TMS wants to speak to it, has to do with number of hours worked and when you become eligible for overtime pay. So I can't think off the top of my head how that ruling would need any different language than what's presented here. But that is a good question. We could certainly ask our school committee attorney to review it if you think that there's an update for that needed.
I'm just thinking that in our policy in Greenfield is that we have a certain number of hours to have to work to receive the benefits, but the rulings seem to lean toward consistent days, which would then provide the employer to provide for benefits. So substitute working 2 hours a day for a week or many weeks might qualify, even though it would be contrary to existing town and city policy. So that's a question. I don't know. I do have other comments.
Please continue.
The exhibit would be helpful to see again. I know we've discussed rates over a period of several months, so I'm not familiar. I don't recall the rates for each. So I would like to see that again. I agree with Member Ekstrom on the identification of long-term. It's not specified here, so that would mean it would be discretionary for a report by the principal to the superintendent or a report by the superintendent to payroll. I don't know who would be taking that authority. And also, substitute teachers will be expected to provide educational services. rather than to assume merely a student supervisory role. So how do we handle a sick day, a half sick day by a teacher? Do we call in a sub, or do we have a para run the class? That would be contrary to this policy. So that anyone running a class would have to be certified and dealing in the educational service rather than monitoring students. So those are all questions. I'll wait for the answers.
Thank you, Mary Martin. Member Hollins?
Well, first I want to say that my memory on this is fuzzy, but I do remember that there's some new ruling that if you use the same substitute over and over, at some point they're eligible for benefits. I don't remember the ruling. And I want to say that you cannot, sometimes you have to use a non-certified teacher as a teacher substitute. And the policy says we want education to continue whether the real teacher is there or a substitute teacher. We're not calling the person in just to say, open a book and study, that we expect. And I'm sure there are guidelines in every school that the superintendent oversees, that every teacher has a substitute packet planned of what to do with the students if that teacher's out, so people don't come in and have, I'm pretty sure that's required. And my last comment is I'm pretty sure in the Unit A contract under Article 1 that says who's included, that substitutes are not part of the union.
Correct.
That's why you need to have the sub-pay here.
Okay, there is a motion on the table. Is there any further deliberation on this? I'm hearing a lot of interest in actually spending more time on this policy. All of these questions are really great questions. However, there is the motion on the table to accept this, so all those, is there further comment?
I just want to say that you can bring a policy back up to change it. So when you vote a policy, it doesn't mean for the next 20 years it can't change. Some of these policies have really been needed because they're so out of date. So I would encourage, even if you keep studying it, would be another 4 or 5 months, that you consider passing it. It's been worked on as a priority to get something more current.
Okay. Yes, Mayor Martin?
The questions I brought forward, I think, relate to following policy and law, so that I'm sure this policy won't prohibit us from being compliant with the law and our existing policies. So I will vote to support this policy as presented, and to, I expect, though I don't recall the numbers for the fee schedule, I understand the fee schedule. So we had discussed it and we agreed on it, so it exists. And whether someone teaches a class and they're not experienced or competent or certified and they're not a teacher, then I think that's just a violation of policy. So that'll come up somehow back to the school committee. And the identification of long-term, maybe we have to find out what it is. So it'll be interpretations from at the principal's level, at the superintendent's level, and then come to the school committee, and we will determine at some point what long-term is. If it's 1 week or 2 weeks or 6 months, then we'll have to deal with that. But someone will eventually in the system who's doing the day-to-day deed will identify the long-term sub. So I'm going to vote to support this, and we have had this on the docket for maybe a year. And if I recall, the union president, Mr. Babakwa, stating probably 12 or 13 months ago, speaking at a public comment, stated the critical issue of the day before you start the budget for FY18, which is the one we're in now, is substitute teaching. Find a way to do it and get a policy. So here we are 12 or 13 months later. So if we want to satisfy the interests of the union and as well as the interests of our hard work, we should probably support this tonight.
Is there any further discussion? Yes, Member Karen?
I just want to be clear that while the wording may not be exactly how you would like it to be, Superintendent, that it does not affect the way that you are hiring people now. So when I vote this in, then I am not changing your policies.
I believe the policy as written, as well as the prior policy, both give us enough latitude to hire substitute teachers as quickly as possible based on the pool available. I think that the draft in front of you is an improvement over the prior version. There are a few questions that were raised here tonight, but I think we're moving in the right direction.
Yeah. All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And one opposed? Any abstention? Okay. Motion passes. Thank you. And we have one other main agenda item. The Superintendent Goals. The former chairperson of this subcommittee is former member Tripp. And I did also serve on this subcommittee, as well as member Ward, who just stepped out for a moment. The committee has been working with the superintendent to set superintendent goals. This is a requirement for us as a district as part of the superintendent evaluation system. We are a little behind schedule, as you can imagine. Generally speaking, the superintendent goals are set and voted at the beginning of the school year, if not prior to the school year, in order to give the superintendent an entire school year to meet the goals. This is something that's done with significant input from the superintendent, but it is a collaboration. There was much back and forth with the subcommittee regarding these goals. And the subcommittee did come to a consensus to support a recent draft of these goals that have changed just slightly. I'll leave that to the superintendent to explain. It's also worth noting that what's happened here is that the superintendent has taken the proposed goals and inserted them into the rubric that we will use later on to evaluate the superintendent. So we are not evaluating the superintendent today. You'll see in some boxes, proficient has been marked. This is an error. Please do your best to ignore that. This is just because this is a template that was used, and in plugging in the new goals, it was accidentally forgotten to delete that. But I think it's nice to have them inserted into the rubric so we can see and get more familiar with the superintendent evaluation report, so it's not a big surprise as it comes forward. However, these goals are what we're voting on. So if, at this point, we can, as we have with the policy just now, we can discuss language, we can discuss the goals, we can amend them, edit as needed here. And with that, I'll yield the floor to the superintendent to fill us in on any changes and a little bit about the process.
Sure. So thank you for that good historical description and a little bit of what the document is. I recognize that for a new member looking at the goals, without a lot of history about the Educator evaluation system, which is the system we use in Massachusetts and here in Greenfield, which started in the 2014-2015 school year, there's not a lot of sense about how do these goals come to be? What's the process? What I'd like to offer is that if anyone has questions about this, because it has been the result of several months of subcommittee work, that...
Now,
the basketball game is much more interesting. So it's just coming through. All right, so there are three goals here. One is a professional practice goal, and you can see this under step 1 on the cover. There are 3 goals listed: professional practice goal, student learning goal, and district improvement goal. And then those are the specific goals that are listed throughout the document. These 3 goals each have key actions and benchmarks. And that is designed to give the committee a clear sense of how do we measure, has this goal been met or not met? So when it comes time to evaluate, you would be looking at this exact document. The committee's job at evaluation time, not now, is to assess how much progress was made on each of these 3 goals, and these are the goals that are specified by the Educator evaluation system. These aren't goals that I just said, I'd like to do one about this and one about that. They actually recommend you need to identify a professional practice goal, which means how do I get better at what it is that I'm here to do, a student learning goal, which identifies how well are our kids doing. If we're here and talking about student achievement, how are they doing with that? And then a district improvement goal, how are we doing moving the work forward? At evaluation time, you will also evaluate on a whole host of other indicators, and these are in those 4 standards: instructional leadership, management and operations, family and community engagement, and professional culture. So although these 3 are pulled out as specific goals, I'm still responsible for every single standard and indicator on the professional practice standards for superintendents. That alone is about a 20-something page rubric, and it goes through each of these means and what it looks like in practice. So I'd be available to talk with anybody about that so you have a sense of what the expectations are. But tonight we're only talking about these 3 goals. And what I'd like to do, I'm not going to read everything, but I would, if you'll indulge me, like to read the introduction. When I first brought these goals forward, I focused heavily on the actions and the benchmarks, and I was asked by the Personnel Subcommittee to provide some context for it and to explain what's the impact of this. So I'd like to just read the beginning of these 3 goals for the viewing audience, and then I'll be available for any questions. So the professional practice goal for instructional leadership reads as follows. At the heart of every district's success is student learning. In order to lead effectively, we must allocate time, resources, and attention to student learning. Creating opportunities for leaders to focus on effective instructional practices, structures, and routines is necessary for improved educational outcomes for students. The Massachusetts Educator evaluation system provides a framework for strong instructional leadership with a focus on district leadership, observing and providing high-quality feedback in schools, school-based leadership, observing and providing high-quality feedback in classrooms, and teachers delivering high-quality instruction with the benefit of this feedback and through self-reflection and collaboration. This goes on to identify actions such as visiting every school by September, at least once, observing instruction, setting priorities, and so on. I won't read that list as I promised I wouldn't, but it goes throughout the year identifying what this looks like. And really the focus of this goal is leadership in the classroom and identifying what's going on at the classroom level. I will say that that's important because if we don't do it, it's very hard to get anything else right. Second goal is student learning. This is around the area of proficiency in English language arts. This is not to say that math and science and the arts and music are not important, but this has to do with identifying one key goal and starting there as a place to begin to identify how are we doing with one important area. You can't choose every area as a goal. Greenfield Public Schools strives to deliver a world-class education to all learners. Given the connected nature of our 21st century world, excellent communication and literacy skills are necessary for students to succeed. This goal intends that all students will demonstrate proficiency in English language arts, and that students who need specialized instruction to do so shall receive support in the form of tiered instruction, differentiated instruction, tutoring, and/or acceleration. And then it goes on to identify key actions and benchmarks. This is a new metric for us, and it's important to note that it is not based only on end-of-year tests, which we call a post-mortem test, sort of the learning is over, we've taken a high-stakes test, did they pass or did they fail? This is based on just-in-time measures, formative assessments of learning throughout the school year that allow teachers to adapt and do a better job or to continue to support students. And the third goal is around district improvement. And I'm really excited that we have a new ad hoc committee looking at this. This is about strategic planning and organizational leadership. The Greenfield Public Schools Strategic Plan is a robust, multi-year document that leads all aspects of our resource allocation, instructional approach, and relationships with students, staff, families, and the community. The current strategic plan was voted unanimously in October of 2015 by the Greenfield School Committee. It had extensive input from the teachers, administrators, and stakeholders of our schools as a result of a year-long entry process, 2014-2015. The goal below will produce a progress report of the work accomplished under the strategic plan and the work that lies ahead of us. So this goal is about continuing our strategic plan, delivering a progress report to the committee, an honest assessment of where we are and where we still need to go, and then updating and creating an up-to-date blueprint of the work that lies ahead of us. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Mayor Martin.
Yes. Superintendent, on the student learning, so I know there are a number of learning areas, but we focused on English language arts when we have deficiencies in math and science. So is that a good choice? And I do understand that the consolidated report stated that we had an urgent deficiency in the language area. So I'm curious as to, it seems like we have maybe several learning areas that are critically important now. And if we measure only one because we're required to do that, how are we going to simultaneously bring up the scores, attention span, and programs in math and science?
Thank you. So first of all, this is an ambitious goal. To my knowledge, there has never been a student learning goal adopted by the superintendent in the last, this is the first time in the last 4 years. And to my knowledge, there wasn't one that was specifically a student learning goal prior to that. I don't know if you recall one. So it is actually a more ambitious step. Although it's only selecting one area, the idea is to say, let's choose one area of student learning and use it as a way to focus our school committee conversations. How are we doing? You said you were going to do this. How's it going? It actually adds a layer of, it certainly adds a layer of accountability, but it also drives the work of the principal's goals and the teacher's goals. So there's an alignment between what's stated here and what the committee believes is important and what the focus of the other staff throughout the district are. So if the committee decided we don't want English language arts, we want you to come up with a math goal, we could certainly do that. We have room to grow in other areas as well. But it's also fair to say that there are a lot of strengths in our math results and our science results. So you could choose any one of these areas and really identify where do we need our kids to go. And that's where we want our eye to be on the prize. And so that's what we've tried to do here.
And I'll just jump in quickly to say that the subcommittee specifically requested that the superintendent include a student learning goal. This was a direct response to a request from our subcommittee. We wanted to see something that was going to be addressing student proficiency specifically. Any, yes, Member Hollins?
I had a few comments. I'll talk about instructional leadership. I think it's great to put, an introductory paragraph, but I think when you have a goal, you need a goal statement and an introductory paragraph about the, philosophy of education isn't the same as a goal statement to me. So it looks to me like the goal, there are key actions and benchmarks, but that all relates to the goal. And it seems to me that the goal statement is, from reading this page, is something like to assure timely completion of principal evaluations, with a focus on classroom teaching, including database achievement, review, and planning. But I think in all three areas, there's an introductory paragraph that isn't the same as a goal statement. So that's not disagreeing with it, it's just I think there needs to be a clear goal. And the second thing is, I actually, it's a requirement, a state requirement to do principal evaluations. But my thought, given that we have had a fair amount of turnover, and when I ran for school committee initially, I said my interest was in school culture. I'm really interested in how our principals feel about working here and what kind of supports do they need to do their job. And I think it's really important. We've brought it up a couple times in policy, the need to talk to principals about their salaries and having a plan. But my thinking would be I'm less interested in evaluating, which is kind of hierarchical, more than building a team and really talking to principals. What do they need to feel that they love their jobs and they have the support they need to be great instructional leaders in their own schools? So personally, I think going in and observing classrooms is the job of the building principal. So I like the goal, but I would rather see the goal on working with principals to assure they have the support they need in order to be instructional leaders in their schools. That would be my thought. I just don't see a goal statement, but it looks like it's about evaluating principals. And I had the same comment on the second goal. And I want to say for the new members, this is the first time the whole committee has seen this. Same with proficiency in language arts. I don't see a goal statement, and it looks like from reading the actions and benchmarks, the goal is to assure each school is increasing achievement in English. And my thought here is that around the goal setting is one of the policies we passed was a policy on school councils. Our policy is really outdated. It's one of the few policies in Section B on governance we didn't get to that we passed because it needs so much input from the administration. But it seems to me the school councils work with the principals to set goals for the school. And I'm just not sure how all of this fits together. What I do know is that when we talked about curriculum, we went from two assistant superintendents of curriculum to a curriculum director, and we talked about how we really don't have a curriculum plan for the district. And we looked at that in terms of policy, because we have policies on curriculum that need curriculum planning that need to be updated. So personally, I think it would be great to have a goal to develop a curriculum plan, since we're bringing somebody new into a new position, to make sure that every area of curriculum is updated and has books they need or whatever. And my last thought on the strategic planning, again, it needs a goal. It looks like the goal is to update the strategic plan. And the superintendent said that there's a committee set up. The school committee has a committee to do that. So that sounds to me like it's something that the school committee is going to do, working with the superintendent. And I just wonder if that is a superintendent goal, if it's something the school committee is going to be doing in a committee.
Member Ward, did you have a comment? Superintendent, did you have a comment, or did you want to?
I'll defer to Member Karen.
Member Karen?
I actually really appreciated the proficiency in English language goal. I just wanted to point out you can't be proficient in math or science without a proficiency in English language, and I'm watching children struggle with that regularly. And I also really appreciated that you included not just standard learning, both ends of the spectrum. I really appreciated that. I can see Member Holland's point that maybe the language could be a little bit more straightforward on the goals. I can figure out what they are, but it may be more straightforward, and then an explanation of why you believe what you believe would be great. And is the strategic plan something that we review every year, or is that a 5-year plan? I was unsure of that, so that was my next question.
The strategic plan is something that it's a long-term look at the district. I believe that we're in year 4 of our current strategic plan, which extends loosely into 10 to 15 years, I believe. This should be included actually in the new member packet. I recommend everyone take a look at it. But with the combination of, the school committee voted in to have the advisory committee in order to collaborate with the superintendent to review the strategic plan, but also to set district goals. So they're slightly different things, however, it should all really come together in alignment. So that's what, hopefully that's helpful. Did you have anything to add to that?
I think the mayor has a question.
Yes, Mayor Martin.
I think for the newer members, the strategic plan was reviewed, modified slightly in October 2017 with most of the members here. And so we had kind of like a mini retreat, I think it was on a Saturday, here, and went through the whole plan. And after everyone offered their suggestions, recommendations, and ideas, and then we filtered everything out, synthesized it, and it turned out to be just like the plan we had. So we kind of just stayed with the plan of 2015. So I think that's a good indication because it was different people in 2015 as there were in 2017, and a review of the plan by the new members is probably a good idea. I would want to comment on the learning area. I think obviously the learning and language is very important, and there is a consolidated report that came out August or September of 2017, excuse me, indicating we had a deficiency in that area. So we are already attending to that deficiency. That's why I thought it might be an advantage to take another area, since we're nearly mandated to improve on that area, to take up math or science and improve on the areas that we also recognize. So that was just a thought. And for my own information, we're not going to do anything with this evening. It's going to go to subcommittee.
Well, that's actually where I was going. We don't have a motion on the table. All of this discussion is great discussion, and generally, in order to have this level of deliberation, we start with a motion and a second.
I'll make a motion.
Yes, Mayor Martin.
I'd like to move that we adjust the student learning area to math, and I move that we change the student area of learning to math instead of language arts. That would need a second for discussion.
Is there a second?
I'll second it for discussion.
So I'll speak to that and
Yes.
pretty much mirror what I've just said, is that we are in the process of dealing with the consolidated report deficiency in that area. And I don't know the plan. I haven't seen the plan for that, but I've been informed that it's a good plan and it's going to satisfy the reporters. So. Working in another area that's so important is math. I think the combination of learning the language of the area and the family, bringing the student up to a level of, however it's measured, with a score or with a program, then I think that's for the benefit of the students, which is why we're all here.
Member Alexander.
I'd like to interject one comment, and I do have one question relating to the goal, though. In order to become proficient in math, you have to be able to read the textbook. And many times I've been doing substitute teaching in other areas or other districts I am seeing where we can really, everybody nationwide could focus down on the English language. So if you can't read the math textbook, then, why are we going to the math so hard? That's just my thought. Next question is, if this is a goal for 2017, 2018, then we are going to need as a committee to produce a set of goals before next fall for the next year. Is that correct? That part, superintendent's nodding their head, yes, so that's got to be my answer. Thank you.
Superintendent?
So I'd just like to address, first of all, I didn't realize that the committee had not seen these goals in their prior form until tonight. I think I had understood that they were sent out by the chair of the Personnel Subcommittee and in at least one of the full committee's prior packet. If that wasn't the case, I think that lends itself to some sort of natural confusion around why these goals, why this area, because in fact these goals in this area has been probably 4 or 5 months worth of discussion at the subcommittee level, which is part of why that they arrived here tonight. I do want to just try to go through a few things. One is that these are goals for the current school year, so it is important that they're right. It's also important that they be set so that there is some clear direction in terms of what the committee thinks is important. It's no fault of anyone here. It's a bit challenging to have a transition in the committee and then be asked to set goals as one of the first things without an awful lot of background on just the progress. It has been stated that there was a deficiency in a sort of program review. So I believe that's referring to the coordinated program review, which specifically came up with 30 plus areas of commendation for our district in which we're doing really very well, and 1 or 2 very specific areas which need further review. And one of the very clear areas is that we need to do a better job of our curriculum for our English language learners. And that is a subset of our population for whom we have identified and begun to improve our curriculum materials, our instruction, for whom their first language is not typically English, and they're learning English, and they're doing a great job of that with the support of our teachers, but without necessarily a clearly articulated and linked curriculum. So we are aware of that and working on that, but that is distinct from English language arts. So those two things, it's not double dipping, so to speak. Oh, we're already doing it, let's throw it in as a goal. It's actually saying we are working on a robust and challenging curriculum for our English language learners, but to do that well, we also need a really good English language arts curriculum for all learners. And that's why we're talking about, here's the instruction that's good for everyone, but how do we accelerate it? How do we support it? How do we change it for different kind of learners? So these two pieces fit together very well. I think what I'd like the committee to understand is that these goals that are in front of you are challenging. These goals that are in front of you are shooting high and saying, let's go for it. In addition to the snow days, the burst pipe, the management, the substitutes, the policy work, the subcommittees, these are saying we want to put student learning first. So I'm not, I'm happy to continue to work with the committee in any form. The paragraphs were specifically a response to a subcommittee request. They were short, concise, and I was asked to expand on them. So this is work by committee. It's challenging to please everyone. I'm happy to take the information that we received tonight and come back with some updates if the committee would like that. The other thing that might be helpful is some specific, we've looked at data informing all of these, so it might be helpful for the committee to have that data set looking at why are we forming these, why now?
Member Hollins.
Well, I wasn't at any of the meetings, and I appreciate that you keep getting different suggestions and that you keep changing, but I do think if at the very end we have to say, was the superintendent proficient in addressing the goal? It's just really important to have a clear goal statement so we know what the goal is. That would be mine. And the other thing that might be helpful maybe to you is, I'll guess 6 times there have been requests to understand student achievement data. And I always have a little trouble when the superintendent says there never was a goal, but we did have a goal of bringing in growth model assessment in reading and math. We did that in 2009. It's in all the schools. I think every single student is followed in reading and math unless the program's been abandoned. I don't know, but maybe there's a way to look at reading and math because I think we have growth model assessment for every child. Where are you in the beginning of the year? Where are you in the middle of the year? Where are you at the end of the year? Is that still true?
So the question was there ever student achievement goals? 75% of students will measure, right? So sort of progress goal would be, we'll do this, we'll implement that program, we'll do such and such. And so what I'm pointing out is that this is a paradigm shift, and it puts, it's a different quality of goal, and it requires a different commitment of time and energy and resources, and it requires a commitment to the learning of our students as distinct from facilities, budget development, any of the number of myriad other things. So I'm not pointing it out to say somebody else didn't do this in the past, it's a fault, but to identify that it takes a different kind of focus to achieve this kind of goal.
I understand. I'm trying to pull in the mayor's comments and some prior requests from, I think, Member Nunez, that we look at our achievement data, and we have for every single child, I think, we still pay that software, how they're doing beginning, middle, end of the year.
We do the NWEA map testing. We're coming into a January cycle of it now. That's ongoing in our schools. And that's why this addresses a measure using that.
Yeah, so I was just suggesting we could pull in maybe math. Anyway, that's my thought, is a clear goal statement.
Okay, I'm going to jump in here. So the subcommittee did also have similar feedback about a clear goal statement, and we did also want to have a little bit more substance in that initial summary. So I think that, what I'm hearing, I also appreciate the superintendent's clarification of English language arts versus English language learners, because this is two distinct things that we're talking about here. Again, unfortunately, Member Tripp isn't here to speak to it, but as a former member of the subcommittee, I will say that, part of the reason why we brought this forward is because as a whole, the committee, there's a significant amount of momentum from the committee to be setting district goals and student achievement goals. And we felt that this was a way that we could move along in that direction by utilizing the superintendent evaluation. So I agree with the superintendent in that this is not generally seen on a superintendent evaluation to have specific student achievement goals that are outlined here. With that being said, we have formed our subcommittee. There is a lot of momentum with the full committee to set district goals, and we will have in short time the opportunity to set these specific achievement goals. Along with that conversation, we'll have to be deciding how we want to measure those goals. And so are we looking at student growth? Are we looking at MCAS data? Are we looking at other benchmarks? So this is part of what we will be asking our subcommittee to do in conjunction with the superintendent. So for me as an individual member, I very much support the idea of changing the language to have more clearly articulated specific goals so that at the time of evaluation, we can say, yes, this was accomplished, this was not accomplished, this was partially accomplished. We see that partially in the key actions and benchmarks, but yes, I agree with some of the input here that we would benefit from a clearly articulated goal statement. I do not support the idea of changing English language arts to math without some more in-depth conversation as to why that would be something we would want to measure the superintendent for as opposed to English language arts at this time. We do have a motion on the table. Is there any further discussion on this? We can, for new members and for everyone to be clear, we can vote on this motion. There's always the opportunity to, for someone who has put a motion forward to actually remove their motion from the floor. We could send this back to subcommittee. We could request that the superintendent make some of the changes that we are suggesting here and bring it back to full committee at our next meeting. There are some options here. But so everyone is clear, the motion that is on the table is to support the goals that are listed here with the, pardon?
I believe the motion is to change the student learning area from English language arts to
math. But everything else is supported,
No,
correct,
just-
in your motion?
Just that. So I would suggest
Okay.
that.
Thank you.
With Member Alexander's comment that this is 2017-18,
That's correct.
and 2018-19 we'll be discussing in maybe 4 months or less.
Just around the corner.
And there is a contractual obligation and maybe a DESI deadline to have these goals passed and approved by the school committee for the May evaluation. I think that's the date. Then I would be willing to withdraw that along with this motion, and approve the learning, or someone else can make a motion.
I'll withdraw my second.
And I'll withdraw the motion to change language arts.
And I'll make a motion to move this to subcommittee and bring it back at our next meeting for endorsement.
Is there a second?
Second,
Any discussion on moving to subcommittee?
just I'd like to hear the advantage of doing that.
Because I think the chairperson said there were some wording changes, and the superintendent said she could make a goal statement, and it sounded like there wasn't a lot of disagreement about that.
Member Karen?
That doesn't need to go back to subcommittee though, correct? We can just ask superintendent to just rearrange the wording and bring it back to us next month? That doesn't need to go to a subcommittee again?
If that's the intent, yes, that is correct. She can make those changes and bring it at the full committee. Any other discussion on this? So there's a motion on the table to send these goals back to subcommittee to address some of the concerns that were listed here today. All those in favor of moving back to subcommittee?
Aye.
I see 1, 2, 3, okay. And I'm a no. So that motion passes. So this will go to subcommittee to address what has been discussed here. And we will hopefully have it at our next full committee meeting.
Madam Chair, I thought it was just going to go back to the superintendent, and she's going to make those changes and bring it back.
No, my understanding is that the motion that was on the table was to bring to subcommittee. Is that correct?
Yes, I thought that's what
Okay.
you were suggesting.
And that's what we were voting on. So that's what we voted on, and we will look forward to that. Thank you, everyone. At this time, there is no new business that I have to bring to the table. Mayor Martin?
Just a couple of questions, if I may. An enrollment report, did we agree to do that quarterly or monthly? I don't recall.
There was no vote of the committee that I'm aware of. I generally provide it monthly. I don't believe it was in the packet this month, but I'd be happy to provide it next month. I generally do so.
Thank you. The students from Puerto Rico, have we, there's been a lot of chit chat about that on the state level, and I can't believe they gave away $60,000 to 12 districts to help. But do we have an update on the students for the Greenfield district?
We do continue to receive some new enrollments. I think we've had another 3 or so in the last week. The number is not overly large in total, and they continue to be included in our classrooms, welcomed in our classrooms, and accessing our curriculum. And our teachers are doing a great job of making that transition happen well.
Thank you. Just for my own information, maybe others, is there a term that's used that is maybe more general for new students coming from the island of Puerto Rico?
That's a great question. We continue to refer to them as students coming to us from Puerto Rico.
Okay. I'll follow.
We'll call them new Greenfield residents. How's that?
Great. Another question I had was on the, when we stated the number of seats available for school choice, we did it by class. I was wondering how we have filled those numbers of the classes over since October 1st.
I think the best thing to do is to give you a school choice report and like our vacancy and our enrollment. In many cases, we filled the advertised vacancies fairly quickly. So if we say we have 1 first grade classroom or 3 kindergarten classrooms, typically we get 5 or 10 applicants. And so we have a lottery for the few families that we can accept through the school choice seats we have available. So typically we fill our school choice seats pretty quickly. There are a few grade levels where we still have open seats, and we welcome school choice applications to our open seats throughout the year.
So I may be confused, but I believe that the school committee controls the number of seats available for school choice by class. And so we wouldn't be opening them up beyond the ceiling of the vote from the school committee for each class. So if we had 100 seats that we opened up over K through 12 or 1 through 12, then we would have 65 students who took those 100 seats or 100 students who took those 100 seats. So this gives us a feeling as to what we need to do in May, again, when it's by DESI regulation, to choose the number of seats by class for school choice.
The only exception to that, Mayor, is that once we admit a school choice student, it's not on a yearly basis, it's for their tenure in the Greenfield Public Schools. So if we admit a student in kindergarten, they are a Greenfield student through graduation. So they remain with us, and then any new seats are available to a kindergarten or first grader or eighth grader. Right. But you're correct, school committee votes annually. We'll do that vote again in April, May, and then we stick to those number of seats.
Okay, and I don't mean to be confusing, but it is, I understand the ones who have already choiced in are staying with us.
Right, so they're not counted, they don't have to reapply
right,
each year.
Exactly.
That's right.
And just one last question. Another policy, and I am only mentioning policies because I've spent 6 months with policies. I've learned a lot. The new hires. So we have a policy, whenever we hire, the superintendent reports on a monthly basis all the new hires to the school committee. So I know we had one last quarter. I'm just wondering whether we can get that report soon.
We are shortchanged in the HR department, Mayor, as I believe you know, and we have not given you a new hire report. That's an oversight, and we'd be happy to get you one. I don't believe there's a policy that states that we provide that to you or how often, but we can get that in your next packet as well.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you for indulging me.
Member Hollins, new business.
Yes, I had 4 or 5 things to bring up. The mayor just brought them all up, which is really interesting. But I did want to make a comment about something we did at our last meeting. We brought up a policy, BDA, on the school committee organizational meeting. And we made a last-minute adjustment based on a concern. And the old policy said that I don't have the exact wording with me. The old policy said something like, the school superintendent is always informed about everyone who's renting a building, something like that. And I think the superintendent said, well, this may generate more work. I don't remember the exact statement. And it was changed to say, it's in our minutes. It says, and or the superintendent and or the principal must be aware. It's hard when you make a wording change at the last minute, you don't get to think. So when I got home, I thought, the reason why the superintendent's office always has to be aware is because we charge fees, and it has to go to the business office every single time. So I think that has to go back.
Member Hollins, thank you. Yes, it's not new business really, because it's old business, but I appreciate you bringing it up, and we can bring that to the policy subcommittee so they can review.
Thank you.
And at this time, we do not have any reason to go into executive session, so I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second? Okay. All those in favor of adjournment?
Aye.
All right. That's unanimous. Thank you, everyone.
All of our productions at GCTV are sponsored in part by Bay State Health, providing the care you and your family need when you need it close to home. Visit them online at baystatehealth.org. Greenfield Savings Bank. Visit them at 400 Main Street in Greenfield. Call them at 774-3191 or go online to greenfieldsavings.com. Greenfield Community College, providing access and excellence in higher education in the Pioneer Valley. Visit them at gcc.mass.edu. The Hammond Family. The Hammond family are longtime supporters of Greenfield Community Television. New Fortune Chinese Restaurant on the Mohawk Trail in Greenfield. Visit them online at newfortunema.com. Call them at 772-0838 and check them out on Facebook. Real Cleaning Services, cleaning Hampshire and Franklin County since 1972. We don't cut corners, we clean them. Check them out online at realclean.com. Call them at 413-422-1143. People's United Bank, located at 45 Federal Street in Greenfield. You can call them at 774-3713 or visit them online at peoples.com. The Solar Store of Greenfield, replacing fossil fuels and nuclear power one home at a time. Visit them at 23 Fisk Ave. Call them at 413-772-3122 or visit them online at solarstoreofgreenfield.com. Thank you to our sponsors for supporting all of GCTV's productions.